Welcome back to Nightmare Logic, the podcast that your mother warned you about. I'm Christopher Smith, here with
Peter Sawyer.
Strap in as we rant about artificial intelligence and ask questions that we've all been asking. How screwed are indie filmmakers really? Hey, Peter. How you doing, man?
Not too bad. How about you?
Yeah, pretty good. What's new?
I have almost a beard. I haven't done this in
Yeah, you do. You look slightly homeless.
Good. No, this is I call the beard, or I heard a quote about beards as being the padded bra of masculinity, and I stand by that. I think it's just kind of a funny way to put it. But I've grown one once, and that was 2012, and I had red facial hair, and I was like, oh, hell no. So I didn't keep it very long. Now that I have some gray in my hair, this is more of an experiment to see like if it's all gray, but I still see the fucking red. So
yeah, totally makes sense. Did you watch anything good this past week?
Yeah, I have I guess 2.5 things I want to mention, and I'll start with a half thing because I'm not quite done with it. But if you're a Texas Chainsaw Massacre fan, you are probably well aware of Chain Reactions, a documentary about it with like 5 different speakers. And I'm 4/5 of the way through. But the reason I thought to bring this up was last week we talked about titles, and the documentary opens with Patton Oswalt talking about the title of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
That's cool.
And how he's like, because it was from one of his like stand-ups, it's footage of that. And he's basically saying, he's like, yeah, you need a title that you can see in your head before you even see the movie. And so he's like, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is it. And the funny thing about it is, but it's also not true, because the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, only one person gets massacred by a chainsaw. But yeah, it's a hell of a name. And it's really insightful. I highly recommend people watching this because every person so far has really interesting insight to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but also that kind of brand of horror movie that's just primal and there's no fat on the bones, and how it pushed limits and was really, Stephen King was like, this wasn't even in the zeitgeist. That's how insane it was when I saw it.
Wow. Yeah. It's also interesting because I'm pretty sure it looks pretty low budge for the time, like 16 millimeter film probably. And
yeah, there was a theory, I think, that it was shot on 16 and then presented as 35, which made it look even more grainy.
Yeah.
So it looked like you were watching something that was real.
Yeah. It's interesting. My executive producer on a film that I've been working on for a long time, a documentary, she worked on the first Chainsaw Massacre as I think she's like a production assistant or something. It was the first thing she did.
Wow. In the 70s or whatever?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. She's older.
Gotcha.
And I think that she lived in Texas at the time, and that was just like the local production.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. It's a very cool documentary.
Yeah, I want to check that out, actually. I love any kind of making of behind the scenes kind of documentaries because, I don't know. First, I like learning how they did things, but I also get kind of stoked about making my own projects. So, yeah, definitely want to check that out. I've actually never seen any of the Texas Chainsaw Massacres.
See the first one, just because that's kind of it's like a Night of the Living Dead or a Psycho kind of Exorcist.
Right.
One of those like
it's
top
canon.
yeah, for the genre, because it was such a shocking movie.
Cool. Yeah, I'm going to check that out. I saw another movie that Peter recommended this week, which is shockingly embarrassed. Shockingly embarrassed. I'm embarrassed that I hadn't seen it up until this point. That's In the Mouth of Madness. Classic John Carpenter. But man, I loved it. Thanks for recommending that. Yeah, that it's like psychological horror, and also has like a weird, I guess they're like aliens or something, but it kind of like demon-y quality.
It's the whole H.P. Lovecraft.
Exactly. It's Lovecraftian. That's a very good way to put it. Yeah. So I really enjoyed it. I interestingly enough, I felt it looked a little old. It came out in 95, and I was a little surprised by that because it almost looks like an 80s or early like 80s film in a way, the way the like cinematography was, and the creature, some of the creature effects, but mid 90s it turns out. So
A fun fact about that movie is John Carpenter wanted Metallica's Enter Sandman to be the opening theme, and he couldn't get it, so he just wrote the kind of like metal hard rock intro.
Was he already scoring his movies at that point?
Yeah, he's I think he always did. I don't know about his short films, but you know, Halloween I think is the big one that put his scores on the map, or the most familiar when people are.
And did he score other people's films in addition to making his own?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. It wouldn't surprise me. I feel like I should know the answer.
I was just curious. I mean, it's neither here nor there, but
he was asked recently to do that, and I believe he said yes. And I cannot remember who asked him.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Well, the other thing I want to talk about real quick is...
Wait. I got my two other...
Oh yeah, you've seen other things. Okay, good.
So, if you know me, or I guess most of you probably don't know me, I am not that well versed in David Lynch. I had seen Dune as a little kid, and it didn't vibe with me. I've seen Blue Velvet, and I've seen Eraserhead. And so I finally decided to watch Mulholland Drive, and I feel like I finally get the uber appeal of David Lynch. I don't know if that's seen as his best film, but I was entranced with it and highly recommend it.
Yeah. You should check out Straight Story.
I've heard that's really, really good, actually.
I've heard that too, but I'm curious to see a rated G version of a Lynch film. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also doesn't feel like one of his movies.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward. He told it pretty straightforward, I think, right?
Right, hence the name. With Mulholland Drive, though, it made me realize with David Lynch, you just don't know what's coming. Every scene was a complete surprise to me watching that, which I found very exciting.
Cool.
Because it worked, but you just were like, oh, wow, this is interesting and different. And
yeah, I'm not super familiar with his work beyond I've seen... obviously I've seen Twin Peaks, and then I didn't actually watch all of it. I watched the first season, part of the second season, I think. So I'm not a huge fan, to be honest, because I did try at one point starting Mulholland Drive, and I turned it off because, I mean, I was a lot younger and I probably just wasn't primed for it, But I don't know. I mean, I should give it another shot, but I generally speaking don't always, sometimes like psychological types of films that jump around a lot and are, somewhat disorienting. Sometimes that comes off as confusing to me, and I don't like when things feel confusing. So.
Yeah, I feel like with Mulholland Drive, you could spend a lot of time analyzing it. And some people do.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm sure that's the thing.
But I mean, I just cheat and will look up what someone else put up there, and I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I can see because otherwise I'll be thinking about those things for days.
Right.
And the last thing I wanted to mention is more of a deep cut that I was not aware of, that I just kind of stumbled on Tubi, and that is Allison's Birthday. And I think it was shot in 79 and made in 81, but it's kind of it's ahead of its time in that there's a couple modern movies, one especially, that either borrowed from it or just hit the same themes and beats. I don't even want to say too much about it because it's one of those you want to go in blind, but I will say it opens with kind of a seance with this girl, Allison, and something bad's going to happen on her 19th birthday. So it sets the stage.
Huh.
And then it kind of goes from there. But there is a little bit of like getting to know the character and all that before it becomes a horror film. But once it does, I was just hooked. And it's a nice gem for people looking for something a little more obscure.
Right. So go check that out. That was
Allison's Birthday.
Allison's Birthday.
On Tubi.
Right. On Tubi. One more thing I wanted to chat about real quick is that last night the Golden Globes happened. And a lot of people are talking today about how Sinners essentially, as some people say, got shut out of a lot of the things that they were nominated for, with the exception of 2 awards. One is for cinematic and box office achievement, which I think is a relatively new award, and some people kind of consider it the Golden Globes consolation prize. And the second one was for best score, I believe, which they didn't even televise. And so there's a lot of people upset because they thought it deserved a lot more. And I'm kind of curious. I know we've both seen it, and probably a lot of you have out there as well. So what's your take on that? Do you think that it deserved to win more, or?
So I'm going to preface this by saying I personally don't care for award shows because at the end of the day, art films are totally subjective. One person may love a movie, the next person may hate it. That said, I would say Sinners should get those 2 awards. It was probably the best made movie I saw last year. I thought it was a really strong score, so I agree with that. Do you know what the other categories were?
Yeah, the one that people thought in particular that he was shut out from was, Ryan Coogler's missing out on best screenplay and losing to one battle after the other. And yeah, what do you think about that as a writer? Do you think that it should have deserved?
So as a writer, I feel the best way to know best screenplay is to actually read the screenplay, is not just see the film version.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Because it's a different version of the story.
Right. And you're looking at the language and all these things that don't end up on the screen.
Right. So I've always kind of been like best written, or when people in comment sections are like, the story, or the script sucked. I'm like, well, have you read the script? Because I don't think those movies would get made if the script sucked.
100%. I mean, well, depends. Someone like a Ryan Coogler, though, might, get stuff funded just on his track record. But for people like us, that's 100% right. True. Yeah.
Well, and I still have not seen one battle after another, so I can't compare the two fairly.
Same. Or read the scripts, presumably.
I was a fan of Sinners. I ironically was not a fan of the vampire stuff, but I loved everything else about it for the most part. So I'm rooting for it, of course.
Yeah. This might give me some haters, but I kind of thought it was a little bit muddled of a story. There were like elements I really loved of it, and I still really liked the movie overall. But I kind of felt like it could have been used another pass or two, just in terms of some of the, I don't know, elements of it felt a little disjointed to me. Like it wasn't entirely cohesive.
What I've heard is that and I can see it, is that the vampire element sort of feels tacked on because it has all this rich backstory, and then they tease kind of this supernatural darkness. Yeah. And then it's that. I feel like it probably would have been a stronger story if it wasn't vampires, but it was the clan.
Yeah. Well, and obviously there's trying to touch on some metaphor there. And I think my problem was it should have ended before he went back and just killed all the racists coming to get him. To me, that just kind of felt like a hat on a hat. Like it almost didn't need it. And it like felt heavy handed in terms of the messaging of the theme. But, I mean, I still enjoyed it. And I mean, that was a good segment in terms of like, it was fun to watch.
Right.
So, but yeah, I just thought that was interesting. And, the reason Golden Globes are important to begin with is that it really sets up the Oscar race and really shows who the front runners are. So, for awards, for those out there who don't know, the awards season kind of starts a little earlier in last year in the fall. And, there's some smaller award shows and they kind of build up. And certain films that start winning awards early might pick up steam and towards winning the Oscar, and it could totally change the race. So that's the reason that Golden Globes are important to people, because they tend to indicate which direction the Academy is going to vote.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
a last thought, I think, is when a movie in the zeitgeist performs really well, and it seems like if you're reading the room, everyone's rooting for it, then people might automatically assume that that's like the winner.
Right.
And Sinners came out, like late spring, early summer, I think.
Yeah.
So if that's already made up in someone's mind that that's the movie of the year, other movies can come along and kind of...
And they might not experience it the same way because they already got
right.
Yeah, I could see that. What's also interesting actually is the meta conversation around it, because now this talk of like being shut out and the backlash, does that kind of persuade some people to vote differently, for the Oscars? I mean, it's a different voting base, but maybe they're like, oh, well, I want Sinners to win, and so therefore I'll change my vote, or, thinking that somebody else would have voted for, or,
Right.
It's tricky. But, you know, as you mentioned at the beginning of this little segment, is that it's all so subjective, right? And some of these people are voting for their friends. Some of them haven't seen all the movies and the categories,
Right,
you know,
right.
and traditionally horror films aren't even in the running for most of these things. You know, if it wasn't Ryan Coogler, it probably wouldn't be, you know, I mean, it was artfully done in many ways. So like that helps, but there's a lot of horror films that never get that kind of recognition.
But the interesting thing about Sinners is like most of it I don't feel like was horror. If it didn't have the vampire element, it wouldn't be considered.
It was like a good entry film for horror. It's like horror light, you know. It maybe more like the way to think about it is it's a little bit more gothic or stylized or something.
Well, it's like I think it's like a genre blend. Like it's historical, like fiction. Does that say? And then it's action, and then
like historical
drama,
fantasy or historical.
So it just kind of brings in all those different elements.
Yeah, totally. Now we can dive into our main segment for the day, which I know everyone's stoked to talk about, which is artificial intelligence. And so today we're basically going to get into an in-depth discussion about it and discuss a little bit of the recent events that have come up that have, you know, keep stirring the debate around AI and its use, particularly in Hollywood. So to get into this, I thought maybe we could discuss the McDonald's commercial that is infamous now. It was put out in the Netherlands right before Christmas, and it was a Christmas commercial advertising the McDonald's cafe, and it was basically a series of little vignettes of all the ways in which Christmas time can be terrible, from like people, their Christmas trees falling off their cars to, you know, destroying their cake mix, batter mix, or, you know, all of the like grumpy people you encounter, things like that. In fact, why don't we go ahead and play that for you guys right now, just a little bit of audio. And this will also be available on the website for you to check out. And you can pause now and go watch it if you want. But we're just going to play a little snippet of the audio so you can get a taste of it.
All the shops turn to mayhem, even Santa knows space, and the tree redecorated your place. It's the most terrible time of the year. The roast turned to charcoal.
Okay, so that was, yeah, it's so ridiculous. So, I mean, I don't know. What do you think of it? Do you think it's good?
I mean, is any of McDonald's food actually artificial as well? Because it would then be on brand with their bad joke. I mean, when Christopher had asked me if I had seen this, I couldn't remember, because you come across so much. I guess the term is AI slop if you're on the internet or if it finds its way in your algorithm. So I think I'd seen a close up shot of the woman in it. I can't remember what she's doing, but I did rewatch it and I was just like, yeah, it's kind of forgettable.
And for me, it's cartoonish and everything looks just off. Like it's like looks kind of real,
right?
But there's like looks like it's gone through 10 Instagram filters.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
And then like even that woman's face, it's just the way she grins. She kind of look like the Joker. I mean,
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean that was supposed to be, I'm assuming, her reflection in like a Christmas ball ornament on a tree, but even still, it felt so like through the like looking glass or whatever it is.
So what's interesting too is it doesn't like make you hungry or want to crave McDonald's.
Not at all. Yeah, it's so silly.
Which is like the whole point of a commercial, you'd think.
And just, you know, it's just a negative messaging about Christmas, which, you know, a lot of people love Christmas. So it seems weird that you're like, yeah, you hate Christmas too? Come get a coffee, you know? So, I mean, that's you know, not related to the AI, but it just seems like a bad idea to begin with. So it's a bit, you know, when you watch it, it just feels so dystopian. It's like, I mean, if it does anything right, it probably captures how a lot of us are feeling in the inside just about society right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the company that did that is called, well, they have a parent company. I'm forgetting the name of it. It's like Sweet something or other. But their subsidiary, which is their AI marketing company, is called The Gardening Club. And so they actually released a statement on it, which I'm going to read aspects of here because I think it brings up some interesting questions. And they basically said, yes, this ad is 100% AI, but it was built with the same care that we bring to any live action film. The brief was tightly prescribed with clear mandate for every single scene, so complete control of each shot was essential and pulled off by our team using proprietary workflows, and pulled off spectacularly well. This was not a prompt and pray process. So they had a director, it goes on to say, that shaped every AI performance, their look, their energy, their emotional presence. They had an AI and post team that spent 7 intense weeks refining every single frame. They rebuilt shots, debated composition, shaped shadows, and turned emotional microbeats with precision, all overseen by Sweet Shop director duo Mama. And Sweet Shop is the parent company. And they said they had 10 or more specialists on each shot, running through tightly engineered pipeline, yada, yada, yada. So I read that because that was their defense once the internet was like, this looks like crap. What the hell are you doing? To me, it's like, assuming this is all true, what they say, like, hey, where are the cost savings, right? I mean, it is expensive to have live action, but a lot of the budget spent in post. And so maybe they're just cutting out like 20, 30% of the budget if you're cutting out the live action stuff, or 40%. I don't know. But if you're spending that much time, 7 weeks, and that's what you're making out of AI, like that's a kind of a statement about how not ready for prime time it is, you might say. I don't know. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, like if you're going to spend 7 weeks creating, I don't know, was that like a 30-second commercial, maybe a minute? Yep. You could easily do that with live action people. I mean, I know some of the shots are like kind of wild Christmas tree on fire type things.
Right.
But
that's true, because there are some like potentially expensive set pieces, like either like closing down a road to drive through town or whatever. Yeah, so you could have bigger ambitions with AI, I guess.
But I look at companies like McDonald's or Coca-Cola, these name brands that you've seen a million times, and I almost wonder why they even bother advertising, because everyone knows it's there.
Right.
I mean, I know they keep
so related to AI, but
no, but I'm saying it has to do with marketing and commercials, and this commercial really didn't do anything except shit on Christmas.
It didn't move the needle. It just, yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, what it did is it backfired, and now everybody's like thinks, and so it backfired so bad. In fact, it's worth mentioning that McDonald's corporate in the U.S. distanced itself, and they said this was like a rogue commercial done by the like Netherlands McDonald's or the European McDonald's or whatever, and they actually took it down. So
I guess they were testing the waters.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what a lot of people are doing right now. I think whenever there's a new technology, you get a certain segment of people who are like, this is going to be the next big thing, and I want to get in early so I can capitalize off it. And I think that's what we're seeing now, and we'll have more examples of that later in the conversation. And, they're testing the waters, and they're brave souls because, at the moment, there's a lot of backlash against that, particularly when it goes wrong. So, which brings up the next point that we can talk about here is that is really about the current state of AI in the industry. And I have a little bit of insight into this personally, just from my work editing and doing cinematography for commercials and other people's productions. And so jumping into that, what I've seen personally is, for almost 2 years now, on documentaries and branded content pieces that I do, which are usually doc style. A lot of times when we're editing, whether or not this happens on every non-scripted thing, they'll take, we do like what we call frankenbiting, and essentially taking different parts of sentences and combining them together from different places to both cut out the fat of people rambling and stuff like that, but also sometimes to create new statements along the lines of what they were saying. There's an ethical line there. You don't want them to create them saying completely new things, but it's totally been fair game for as long as I've worked in industry, over 15 years, to say, take someone saying like something over here, pairing with something over here to get an entirely new sentence. And now what people are doing with AI is if they can't make something like that work, and there's often times where that won't work and you can't quite get the person to convey the thought that, you know, they were trying to through editing. So, but you know, are willing to say it, and you know, you're going to have another shoot with them. Sometimes we're asked to go in and temp that thought using AI, and we'll feed, you know, the interview into a tool. I think I use 11 Labs often to do this, and it'll spit out what we'd like them to say with their voice. And that doesn't end up in the final piece ever, as far as I know. It shouldn't, unless they approve it or whatever. But we do that just as a placeholder, because a lot of times they don't want to hold up the editing process in order to temp it in to see what it sounds like, because they might not even want it in the end anyways. But then when they kind of get the final thing, they might go back and ask a question that gets at that point. Or, you know, in the case of commercial and branded content, they might even just ask them to say it, because they're typically getting paid in those scenarios, where in documentaries you typically don't pay people for interviews because it's unethical. So I've seen that. They're using a lot of VFX tools built into a lot of programs like DaVinci Resolve with their rotoscoping. Premiere has a lot of AI tools, particularly with cleaning up sound. And now I think they have tools to extend music cues to the length that you need, things like that, which, you know, are all things that we have been doing for a long time. We just do them manually, and, you know, the AI tools basically just speed up that process, or sometimes maybe do a little bit better. The rotoscoping in DaVinci Resolve is a really good example, because that process usually in the past, you'd have to go frame by frame and cut out every single, say, like arm in front of a TV or something, you know, by hand. And now you can just kind of like do a few marks and have it track it, and it's done, you know? And so AI is definitely working its way into these post tools. Then there's, as I mentioned, music. Not in addition to extending the music, there's a lot of AI generated music out there. And I think that we're going to start seeing that being used more. I personally haven't seen it, like, you know, in any of the productions I've worked on, but I can only imagine that, particularly in things like reality and other cheaper commercial content or social media, that they're probably starting to do AI generated songs and using them in final pieces. And something else I've seen is people, you know, using generative AI mostly for images, for decks and pitch decks, that is, and essentially trying to convey the idea of a film to help sell it to a commissioner or studio or some kind of funder. I've seen, well, I think that you mentioned, Peter, that film that used AI to create some of the art department assets.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So Late Night with the Devil, that came out like a year or two ago. A movie I really enjoyed. After watching it, you know, you go online, you start thinking about it, and you see reviews, and a lot of people were attacking it for AI use. So I was like, oh shit, they stepped in it. And what I discovered is the art department used it. It was their choice to use it in the capacity where the film is kind of like if you have a Johnny Carson comeback, you know, set in the 70s, and his comeback is on Halloween, and he's going to have all these spooky guests on. They have like the Halloween TV cards that flash before commercials. That's where the AI was implemented. I didn't know watching it. Like I just assumed that, hey, maybe they figured it out on, I don't like CGI even. Yeah, like just some graphic designer did it, but they used AI, and I don't know to what extent, but it got a lot of backlash. And it's just an interesting thing because, you know, I understand why they probably used it for that. Hey, maybe they were short on budget. Who knows? Found themselves in a position like that. But on the other hand, you know, if you're the first one to do it, you might be getting that backlash.
Right.
So is it worth it to use?
Yeah. So people, essentially the art department used it in the assets that they created for the film. And that's something that I've actually, and same thing happened in video games. The game that won Game of the Year this year at the Game Awards, they took back some of their trophies because it came out after the fact that they used AI generated textures in some, not all, but some of the game, and they didn't disclose that. So there was some, anger around that. They've since gone back and replaced all of those with totally human created ones. But I think their excuse was that they were just, moving fast and like they didn't get a chance to swap them all out. So, but it is, it seems like a lot of times when they use them AI in those ways, it's usually like a time saving or cost saving reason. And the last thing I've seen is AI and social media. A lot of companies creating AI slop or AI videos, whatever you want to call it, just so they don't have to like do a full production. But when you're, doing social and you're trying to post something every day, it's a very tempting, quick way to get a lot of content out. So I think those are the ways that AI mostly appears at the moment. We aren't quite yet, it seems like we're going to get into this a little bit, but fully generated AI films and like real content, quote unquote, like premium content. We're not there yet, but that doesn't mean that a lot of people aren't trying to make that happen, And the first example of that I would like to ask you about, Peter, is Tilly Norwood. So for those who aren't familiar, Tilly Norwood is a AI young female, so totally made up by AI person that this company called Particle 6 Group, and they have a new division called Zekoia. I can't even say it. I don't know. But they essentially are trying to represent Tilly Norwood as like an actress, but obviously not a real actress, but essentially be agents to this AI actress and get her cast in AI films and things like that. And they announced this back this summer and it just exploded and people were so angry, including myself. And then a few weeks later, they released the first, it was like a promotional video for their company and it featured her in it. And that spot was called AI Commissioner, which we'll link to in the show notes as well. And it's really the first project to feature her. And what do you think about that? Do you think that there's a future for AI actors and actresses? What are they trying to do with that?
I think it's stupid. Companies, corporations, people at the end of the day want to make money, and this is just a lane they can make money in. If they can do fast content, you don't need to hire a person to do it. But as a consumer of films and, if occasionally I'll play a video game or watch a TV show, like I want to see something real. And I think a lot of people that care about this stuff do. So if the Tilly Norwoods of the world become this like phenomenon where now we have AI generated movies, I think there'll be a lot of boycotting. There'll probably be some people that will watch it. Mm-hmm. I think people are also curious.
But what about with actors in particular?
Well, I think it's fucked up to do to actors because that's something, as a little kid, I wanted to be an actor. I'm not good at it. I'm not great at lying. But that's like a passion people have. And it's like, all right, we'll just get a robot to do it.
So it's fucked up because they're taking the place of it.
Yeah. And it's such like a human quality. People, what they bring to acting is like their trauma, their life experience, all this stuff that's lived, and AI is just patterns and BS.
Yeah, it's ones and zeros. And that's actually a really good point, because they always say, eyes are the window of the soul and hands too, and things like that. And, a lot of that expression are like these micro muscles and things under your eye that just a slight subtle shift that us as social creatures read. And we read these body language that are almost imperceptible that we don't even know we're doing it. And can AI even recreate that? And B, you're right, there's no emotion driving it. And I feel like you can tell as a human, at least still, when that emotion is faked. We're so keyed into that as human beings.
Yeah. I mean, I even have umbrage with the uncanny valley thing that's CGI. Like if I watch something, I mean, I watched, what is it? Stranger Things all the way through final season. I believe, their backdrop was a lot of CGI for these huge set pieces. And I just looked at it. It took me out of it. Like I hate that.
100%.
It's and that's not even AI. That's CGI.
Can you just explain for the audience if they don't know what Uncanny Valley is?
I'll do my best. To me, it's kind of a visual eyesore of where things almost look real, but aren't quite, and you can't quite articulate that.
Mm-hmm. And it's particularly with humans.
Well, I see it more and more on these shows that, don't film on location, but need to create some vast backdrop. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if I look at Hellraiser 2 or I look at Labyrinth or something that predates all this, that looks so much more interesting to me, even if I know it's not a real place, than the new season of Stranger Things, Upside Down, whatever. You're just seeing this synthetic looking world behind.
Right, exactly. You just feel the green screen effects of it. Like, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Like the AI McDonald's thing, it has like a little cartoonish quality about it. It's hard to explain. It's not when you analyze it, but there's just something about
it looks like almost too slick or something as well. Like, I guess it depends case by case, but I hate it.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah. So, and what Tilly Norwood brings up for me too is just this couple of things. One is if you can have an AI generated movie star like they've created with Tilly Norwood, what's to stop anyone from making one? And so why even have one that reoccurs in films? Why, if you're making AI films, why aren't you creating new actors, quote unquote, AI actors for each one? Why even have one? And it's what's funny to me is they're recreating like a fundamentally human phenomenon, which is we identify and grow to like individuals, and we like seeing them in places, which is why I like George Clooney can command so much for a film, right? It's because people like George Clooney. And when you go to AI, they're going to try to recreate, like build a personal brand, quote unquote, around an AI made up thing so they can make it feel more human in a way, because I don't know. To me, it's kind of an interesting, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a paradox or something. I don't know. But that's just something to think about. And then the other thing is that it's also interesting to me that the first AI, quote unquote, actress that was created was a young, white, pretty female. Of course, it wasn't going to be like, person of color or, old white male or even an old white female. They're going to go for the most like generic, like idealized social construct of like what, people want to see, or at least what they think people want to see. So just a little interesting social commentary, I think. Which brings me to the next topic of conversation, which is Darren Aronofsky. So it came out not too long ago, early this spring, that he launched a new venture that's an AI studio called Primordial Soup. And it's in partnership with with Google's DeepMind, not Microsoft, with Google's DeepMind AI research team. The idea being that they produce 3 short AI films and they get access to some of the new tools at Google. And in exchange, they give feedback and try to help them with the direction of developing the tool. And their first project from that was directed by Eliza McNitt, and it's called Ancestra, which premiered at Tribeca.
How long ago?
This spring. In May. Tribeca's in June. So
this is 2025.
Yeah.
So it has premiered. Okay.
Yeah. And interesting enough, there has been reviews, and they're not great. In fact, one headline that I got a kick out of was Ancestra makes the AI film hype feel pretty premature, which I thought was quite interesting. So that's just something to note. And then along with that, Natasha Lyonne has done something similar. And she is also starting a company with Bryn Musser, and it's called Asteria Film. And their first film is called Uncanny Valley, which it's a feature film, and both this and the Darren Aronofsky produced film that premiered at Tribeca are both a mix of AI and live action. And the Natasha Lyonne film called Uncanny Valley is not out yet. It's still in process. But in both of them, when they announced this was going to happen, they got massive feedback. Lots of people are upset. Backlash. Sorry. Yeah. They got massive backlash. People were upset, commenting on their posts, all sorts of things. And they've both since defended it. And, Natasha Lyonne's point is that she's trying to do an ethical AI company and do this ethically, which obviously brings up the question of whether you can do AI ethically for all sorts of reasons we could touch on in a little bit. And, she had a Variety interview recently, and she said, it's all about protecting artists and confronting this oncoming wave, which is ridiculous, I think, when you're talking about how you're the one doing it. So she said, it's comedic that people misunderstand headlines so readily because of our bizarro culture of not having reading comprehension. Suddenly I became some weird Darth Vader character or something. That's crazy talk, but God bless. Addressing the backlash.
Right.
I don't know. I think her comments on the backlash are a little silly. Like, she doesn't understand as an actress why people might be upset of doing that. And she's saying, I should clarify that the AI that they're using is for like scene extension, like you were talking about in Stranger Things, and more supportive types of uses of AI. But it ignores the whole point that there are people who do those jobs.
Right. That's a solid point.
Yeah.
I mean, what's interesting is, who knows? Maybe she makes this and it's mind blowing. Like, maybe it's a really cool project. We can't judge until we see it.
Right.
But at the same time, at what cost? Because that's ultimately is this really going to be opening Pandora's box for copycats? And
yeah, that's the thing. It's like, she might do it ethically, like, or some version of that, but people are going to learn from her experience. And are they going to do it ethically? Will the collective actions of a lot of people, even if they're doing it ethically, amount to a situation in which people are, suffering to some extent by not having work, or by, being forced to consume really crappy films, Like, I guess my point is, like, it's easy to say it's unethical without considering every way in which it could go wrong. And it's impossible to do that, So, like, she can't say it's ethical, I don't think. But what's interesting to me is, in every gold rush, which AI is definitely a gold rush, there's always some people who decide to jump in early and be on the forefront of it, because potentially because they see the writing on the wall and they know, like, oh, if this comes to be, I want to be on the forefront of it, because then at least I will capitalize off it, rather than being kind of the one that gets tossed aside because of it,
Right. There's this quote, you said gold rush, that made me think of it. When there's a gold rush, sell shovels.
Right. And that's exactly what I kind of think. Well, that's what, a lot of these AI companies are doing. But in some ways, that's kind of what they're doing, because I think, for instance, that Darren Aronofsky probably got a lot of money from Google to announce that partnership.
Oh, no doubt.
Yep. And so he's thinking, like, hey, they're going to do a partnership with someone. It should be me. And, Darren Aronofsky, it's a little on brand for him, because he's kind of known for embracing new techniques in filmmaking and pushing the boundary of technology in that regard. And, that is an argument that a lot of people make, which we're going to get into, like, sort of the arguments for AI in a little bit. But I, I'm not sure I buy it 100%. I think it was really about the money, if I'm being honest. And I think that, as filmmakers, we're always trying to get funding. And if you're doing something, both of their announcements got a ton of press. And so if you can kind of be the it project, the first one, like, that might be a way to generate money for whatever project you're trying to make.
Especially if it's controversial.
Exactly. Yeah. Controversy does breed attention, which breeds funding. So this sort of brings us to the next thing that I'd like to talk about and get your input about, because there's been a lot of talk about using AI in the part of the process in pre-production, particularly in screenwriting. And as a screenwriter, I'm curious if you've had any interaction with AI, or what's your sense about it being part of the genesis of the story making process?
So I get why it's tempting. A friend of mine showed me before I even knew what ChatGPT was. He's like, give me an idea for a movie. So I just came up with something on the spot. And 10 seconds later, there's a whole treatment for this potential movie. And so then I looked at it and I'm like, that is crazy,
Yep.
right? And then, but I was like, this feels formulaic. And then he's like, add twist. And yeah, you can just go from 0 to 60 with doing that. But as a writer, the interesting thing about writing to me is the process of discovery. You can have an outline, you can know where you're going, and then you get a better idea. And you're like, oh shit, and just discovering it that way. Whereas like if you're just copying something out of the ether that is, patterns of thousands of different movies to give you some perfect formula for what the fuck is the point?
Yeah. No, you're right. I think the Coen brothers, I think it's Ethan Coen who's the primary writer out of the two, I'm pretty sure. I read a book about their work in the past, and I remember something that's always stood out to me, and I read this book 25 years ago, but something that stood out to me about it was he said what makes his work different, or what he tries to do as a writer, is that whenever he writes something, the first version is usually the expected way. And then he usually looks at that and be like, what if we do the opposite? Or what if we take this in a totally different direction? And that's what keeps their films feeling fresh and like interesting a lot of times. And
that's cool. I'd never heard that.
Yeah. And so I'm kind of curious if maybe there's a way to use AI, just speculating here, where you get the like sort of expected formulaic draft, and then you're like, okay, I'm going to do everything differently. Like you take it as like a starting point and be like, okay, this is what not to do.
Well, if people start using AI to write scripts in such a way and then change them, it's just like a shortcut. I feel like you earn your projects by the blood, sweat, and tears. Mm-hmm. If it's something creative.
Yeah, well said.
If you're like a painter, you're not just going to be like, you know what, I'm just going to press a button on a computer and tell it what to paint and be like, I'm a fucking artist.
Right. No, it's true. I mean, and also like there's no soul in that. And I think people can see much like we were talking about the acting, like whether there's like soul, like there's a hand that made the thing. And, with writing in particular, because we're talking about formulating the story at like the base level, AI really only generates based on what's come before. So you're never going to get a script out of that that's just totally a new and innovative like idea that really pushes the form of cinema forward. It's only ever going to be like a rehashing of stories that we've told before. Right.
And to get away from cliches, that's where you hear write what you know, right? Your life, those moments of things that happen that you never would have thought of. It's like truth is stranger than fiction. So I'll give you an example. So years ago, got into an accident. My windshield was cracked. I had to take it to a mechanic, wherever they're going to replace the windshield.
Right.
But it was hot out, so I had the AC on, and the guy told me, he's like, those glass shards could get sucked in there and spit in your face. And I was like, holy fuck. But I was like, so I wrote that into a script because I'd never seen that.
Right.
I never would have thought of that I was in an accident and that happened.
Yeah.
So
that's
life,
a good point.
You have these moments in life where something goes south or whatever. And you as a writer, you use it.
Yeah. 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 And AI obviously doesn't have that experience, like you were saying earlier, like the lived experience to incorporate things like that. I mean, it sort of has access to all of our lived experience, but I do think like inspiration comes from, all sorts of strange places. And so you're far more likely to come up with something unique that way.
One last thing about like screenwriting, AI and all that is it's not as new as we think it is. Back in 2016, there was a project called Impossible Things, a Canadian production company was trying to put together, and it achieved its Kickstarter goal, but it basically was going to integrate AI patterns, to find like the perfect formula for a movie and then have a human write with that in mind. And what's interesting is it achieved its Kickstarter goal. But if you look at the IMDb page, it's in pre-production. So I think it's kind of a dead end, but it's just people were thinking about it back then.
Yeah.
Trying to get ahead of it. But
yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point. AI certainly isn't new. It's like, I think certain people have been wanting this for a long time, and been kind of working towards it. And then there's something sci-fi about it, it is sort of interesting. But, when you're speculating about future technologies, you're always often thinking about all of the positives and, rarely thinking about the negatives.
Right. And now here we are. The other thing, actually, one is that in my algorithms as a screenwriter, there's companies like Greenlight Coverage that use AI to assess your log lines or probably even your scripts, because they can turn it around super quick.
Have you done that before?
No, but I was curious about it because they do a really good job of presenting itself. And I think it was even before I realized it was AI was involved in it.
We should run our script for Last Call Through just for the fun of it and see what happens.
Jesus Christ. It costs money to use it.
Oh, yeah. Well, never mind then. So moving on to video generation, you did show me, somebody shared with you Higgsfield, which you shared with me. And Higgsfield is essentially software for generating really convincing and lifelike AI video. And you can, with that, you can change what kind of camera, what kind of lens. You can make the character persist throughout the scene or potentially maybe the film. I wanted to play around with it more, but you have to pay for it to even really start playing with it, and at least on the things that I wanted to try. And so I don't have hands-on with it, but what I saw was it was really impressive. I will say it's very, very, very impressive and somewhat scary because, I don't think it's 100% there, but it shows promise in terms of who knows what could happen.
Right. For all that type of stuff, the friend who shared it with me, I agreed. I was like, all right, for previs, you could totally
previs for sure.
You could use that. And if you guys don't know what previs is, it's like if you're shooting a movie, you do your storyboards. You want what the movie looks like before you shoot it, so you kind of have a template.
Yeah, and you could save time on set and.
Yeah, so I could see the use case for that, but
for sure.
You just don't want people then making movies that way.
Yeah. Yeah. What I've kind of still think are barriers to really video generation taking off, and I don't even think that Higgsfield's entirely solved this, is that lip syncing can still be an issue because we are automatically keyed into the shape of people's mouths when they're talking. And even very subtle differences are highly noticeable. And they're pretty good with it these days. But there's still some uncanny valley stuff in the mouth area when people are talking.
Right. A good example is sometimes if some streaming platforms, I've seen that where it's just off. Maybe it's a European film and they're not speaking English, but they have an English dub over.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're like, wait, this is, or even if there's a lag,
yeah,
it just drives me crazy.
Yeah. No, it's true. And what I think about with that is that with TikTok videos and YouTube, the way that kids approach social media these days is very postmodern, where anything can happen at any time, and you're less worried about things like continuity and even sometimes the quality of the shot or the effect that they're doing. All of a sudden, cartoon sunglasses fall on someone's face, in a YouTube video to signify that they just did something thug, or whatever, or just pauses and zooms in real quick. So it's but it becomes hyper pixelated because you zoomed in so close, things like that. And I just wonder if all of these things are actually just training us to accept unintentionally so, but accept the uncanny valley mouth thing. You're talking about the dubbing of voiceover. That's more and more popular on Netflix to watch foreign films with dubbing. And, do people care anymore if there's uncanny valley stuff around the mouth? Who knows?
I tend to read the subtitles. It does bite you in the ass a little bit if there's action and all this stuff and you're trying to read those, but I'm good with reading the subtitles.
No, same, but we're not the next generation.
No, true. But at the same time, I think there's some younger kids that probably will see the older stuff and be like, no, this is cool. There's, like it for the reason we do.
Yeah.
Just they're born in the wrong generation.
No, totally. Yeah. The other problem that is still a problem with video generation, and this segment I think applies a lot to filmmakers because it's the video generation that a lot of us are worried about. But another problem is eye lines. I've still yet to find, I looked for examples before we recorded this of scenes of more than one person's talking to each other but realistic videos. And I've yet to find one. And sometimes when you have more than one people talking in a scene, they're kind of looking at other things or at the screen, but never at each other. And that's something we intuitively know in the language of cinema, that when you cut from this person looking camera left, this person needs to look camera right. And in the geography of the scene in the room, where they should be looking.
180 rule, right?
The 180 rule, yeah, comes into play. I mean, for all I know, AI obeys the 180 rule, but regardless, the continuity from shot to shot of where the person's looking and where their hand is and all of that is off. And I've noticed that in some of the AI generated videos I've seen, where it's like, oh, like he's pointing to that part of the room, but where is that part of the room? We haven't seen it yet. Like it doesn't entirely make sense, the geography of the scene.
Well, so that gets me wondering if AI is just going to start course correcting itself in terms of film or how we.
But the problem is that AI doesn't understand. And this is why I'm not particularly scared about AI. Is AI doesn't understand what it's doing. It's just looking at patterns and how things have been done before, but it doesn't realize in those patterns cutting between shots, because the pattern, it doesn't quite understand that, it's looking at the other shot,
right,
the other person. So it's like dumb to this stuff. And it really, so I think that's going to be, those kinds of things are actually the last barrier for AI and are hard problems to solve. And I'm not saying we're never going to get there. But from what limited things I know about how it works, I do think it's going to take another leap forward in, I don't know if it's the algorithms or a whole different approach to AI before I think that's even really a thing that they're going to be able to do. So I think that limits AI, and from the video generation standpoint, to being more used in montages or music videos or disparate kinds of elements that are montaged together to make a cohesive narrative. But I don't know if we're going to get like a full Stranger Things movie or whatever, because making those scenes and making them feel authentic is going to be really challenging.
Yeah. And what's also kind of fun, I mean, I'm being sardonic when I say that, is that it's like these things with AI are nothing compared to like the real dangers. Mm-hmm. It's like the biggest threat of humanity, as the experts will tell you.
Yep. Yeah, well, let's get into the arguments for AI then. We've kind of touched on them a little bit here and there, or alluded to them, but a lot of people really suggest that AI is like silly to resist it, and that much like other technologies in the past, it's going to disrupt the industry and some people are going to lose their job, but it's going to create new jobs somehow, and it's going to if it's a tool, creative people are going to learn how to use it, and those people are going to come out ahead. And that's what you hear from everyone from Mark Cuban down to, particularly the CEOs of these AI companies.
Right. Well, my thoughts on that are who are from what I understand, right, there's no real guardrails for AI, and you have every AI company racing to be the next Google. So that's dangerous. Mm-hmm. And it all goes back to fucking money.
Yeah.
It's all rich people. It's all billionaires. It's all the corporations who are dragging us.
But do you buy that argument? Do you think that it's really going to be?
I mean, I think they believe that, and they want you to believe it.
Well, yeah. But do you think though that there's truth to it though? Do you think that?
I think there could be truth to that, but at the same time, like in the last year, AI has not performed the way that it's been projected to.
Yeah. A lot of people call it a bubble, like you were saying, that like this is all marketing hype, which I kind of fall in that argument. But also I actually heard a really interesting argument from a programmer he's a YouTuber named the Primogen, but he found this post by the CEO of Microsoft who said, we got to stop calling AI slop. He's like, like as if we're doing them a disservice. And it's of course, it benefits him for people to stop calling AI slop. But the Primogen's argument was that nobody would be calling it AI slop if it were good. Like you don't see the need for other products that are good for them to have to go out and chide people for calling them names or whatever. And, his larger point, though, is that there's such a mismatch between what these CEOs are promising that AI can do, and then when you get in front of it and actually try to use it, like what it actually can do.
Right.
And you feel that mismatch every day interacting with AI. At least I do. And I'm probably not as much of an AI head as other people, but I experiment with it. I try to use it sometimes if I don't know, I'm doing like a refresh of a resume or I don't know, whatever it could be. But like, ultimately I end up redoing it all by hand anyways, because I'm so disappointed with what comes out of it. And right. I'm not using low end models. I'm trying to do it with the best ones I have access to.
For those people who are kind of on the fence and experimenting with AI, I will say the one use that I get out of it, being like such a lover of music and punk music, is I will go to Chat GPT and be like, yo, give me more songs like Hybrid Moments by the Misfits that are of that era, that are deep cuts, and AI will present very interesting song choices and that I have never come across before. There's legitimate uses for AI, and I'm not trying to like argue personally that there aren't. Like by legitimate, I mean like all technology is value agnostic in many ways. It's how we use the technology on what makes it sort of ethical or not ethical. So I think there are fairly like use cases for AI that are both incredibly helpful, but also not too impactful negatively on people. And I think what you said is a really good example. I mean, I think at the same time, someone gave me shit for it because it's like the environmental cost of every time I'm like, that's fair.
This isn't meant to be an entire analysis of AI in general and like all the pros and cons of it, but that is a really good point. The environmental impact for all of this stuff is massive. I mean,
yeah, I think we would be fine as a society or a race of a species, I guess is what without AI.
Yeah.
Like we don't need this, but
it's
here and Pandora's box has been opened.
Well, and the thing is like, they're selling it as like these like shortcuts, right? You can do everything quicker, faster, whatever. But like, Sometimes it's all about, you don't want it to be quicker and faster because it's about the process,
right?
Particularly when it comes to creative things like filmmaking, or painting. It's like, it's not the end result that makes it art. It's the process.
Yeah. It's like you create something and you go through hell, but you have these moments of joy doing it where you have like a breakthrough and you're like, holy fuck, this is really cool. And that's why people are driven to create art. There's a struggle there, and you're compelled to do it if you're like a creative type.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. That's probably a good place to leave it. You have any closing thoughts? Anything you want to share?
Yeah, fuck AI. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a good closing thought, actually. Yeah, I agree. I endorse that comment.
Party on.
That'll bring us to the end of this week's episode of Nightmare Logic. Next week, we're going to sit down with our friend and film historian David Delval to talk about what horror is and how it's evolved from the 1960s when he was a kid until today. For this episode's show notes, go to nightmarelogic.net and feel free to follow us on Instagram at nightmarelogicpod. We'd also like to give a shout out to our amazing composer, Lars Lang Peterson, for our awesome intro. We are your hosts, Christopher Smith and Peter Sawyer. Until next time.